Baseball gambling scandals. Emmanuel Clase, Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, Pete Rose, Black Sox and more. MLB's history with gambling has not caused the league to shy away from corporate partnerships. Cleveland Guardians pitchers Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz have been indicted on charges that stem from alleged gambling misconduct as it pertains to manipulating wagers on specific pitches, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York announced on Sunday. The pair could face up to 65 years in prison if convicted on a slew of charges, including wire fraud conspiracy, honest services wire fraud conspiracy, conspiracy to influence sporting contests by bribery, and money laundering conspiracy. Ortiz is already in custody. In light of all these allegations, CBS Sports felt this would be an appropriate time to revisit some of that history by highlighting some of the most notable scandals and stories. Do note that this article is intended to be a brief, incomplete overview and is not a suitable replacement for a full-fledged education on these incidents. 1903. Krieger rejects offer to throw first World Series. You may know that the first modern World Series was played between Cy Young's Boston Americans and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Did you know that a gambler's attempt to fix the series was thwarted by Americans' backstop Lou Krieger, who alerted American League President Ban Johnson after receiving a letter from the individual that promised him $12,000 in exchange for throwing games, according to the Omaha Morning Bee. The Sporting News obituary for Krieger in 1934 states that Johnson later repaid Krieger for his integrity, using league funds to help provide care for Krieger when he became stricken with tuberculosis, with the acknowledgement that game-fixing allegations persisted throughout the coming years. Let's again skip ahead to when they boiled over and resulted in the most infamous example of game-fixing in the sport's history. 1919. The Black Sox Scandal. Yup, here we have the most consequential game-fixing scandal in professional baseball and arguably professional sports history. It occurred when the Chicago White Sox lost the 1919 World Series to the Cincinnati Reds. The White Sox were accused of throwing the series in exchange for money from crime boss Arnold Rothstein. This is, in short, why Shoeless Joe Jackson has remained a household name more than a century on. Although the White Sox later went to trial, with a grand jury finding them not guilty on all charges, 8 players were banned for life by Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, installed as the league's first commissioner in 1920 in response to the scandal. Whether or not Landis' punishments were fair or reasonable has remained a debated issue. But, as SABR's Bill Land once noted, game-fixing virtually disappeared from the major league landscape after that penalty was imposed on the Black Sox. Earlier this year, Commissioner Rob Manfred lifted the Black Sox's lifetime bans, among others, declaring that they lapsed with the deaths of the individuals. Even so, the Black Sox suspensions weren't the last time personnel were punished for their connections to gambling. 1947. Dodgers DeRocher received suspension. Leo DeRocher was a 3-time All-Star shortstop who later enjoyed a lengthy, Hall of Fame career as a manager. In 1947, though, he was suspended for the season by Commissioner Happy Chandler because of his accumulation of unpleasant incidents. Among them, his embracing of an association with gamblers. In Paul Dixon's biography on DeRocher, then shortstop Pee Wee Reese is quoted as saying, "It seemed like we always had someone hanging around that was a gambler and a bookie." Dixon adds that Brooklyn Dodgers executive Branch Rickey found out that several players were prone to gambling on horse racing and high-stakes poker games. There was no evidence that anyone had gambled on baseball, however. That included DeRocher, who was permitted to return to the dugout for the 1948 season. 1970. McClain suspended for ties to gambling. Nearly a quarter of a century later, Commissioner Bowie Kuhn suspended Detroit Tigers pitcher Denny McClain indefinitely for 1967 bookmaking activities and his associations at that time. A New York Times article on McClain's suspension heavily references Sports Illustrated's reporting, which suggests McClain suffered an injured foot that sidelined him during a pennant race after he was stomped by a hoodlum following his and his partner's failure to pay a debt of nearly $46,600. McClain, who would then win 31 games in 1968, was permitted to return to the mound in July of 1970. 1980, 1983. Mays and Mantle suspended. If you need further evidence that Commissioner Kun took any ties between baseball and gambling seriously, consider how he later placed retired Hall of Famers Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle on the permanently ineligible list after they took ambassador jobs with casinos. Kun even told Mays a casino is no place for a baseball hero and Hall of Famer, according to a 2020 article by Craig Calcaterra. Mays and Mantle would remain unable to work in baseball for the rest of Kun's tenure. Kun's successor, Peter Ueberroth, reinstated them in 1985, albeit, notably, without taking any issue or exception with Kun's original ruling. 1989. Rose banished. After Ueberroth resigned in 1989, his successor, Bart Giamatti, embarked on an eventful 5-month tenure prior to his death. To this day, Giamatti is best remembered for banning Cincinnati Reds legend and player-manager Pete Rose after an investigation into whether or not Rose bet on baseball during his time at the helm. Rose would repeatedly deny the allegations until 2004, when he admitted that he had only gambled on games in which he had managed. An ESPN investigation in 2015 suggested that Rose had also gambled on games in which he had played in. Although Rose's banishment no longer stands to this day, that was lifted along with the Black Sox sanctions earlier this year, months after Rose died last September. He had been allowed to return closer to the game, serving as an analyst on Fox coverage. The Philadelphia Phillies had intended to enshrine him in the team's Wall of Fame in 2017, but they canceled those plans after a woman accused Rose of having a sexual relationship with her during the 1970s, when she was underage. Rose, by the way, placed Ohio's first legal sports bet in January 2023. Perhaps time is indeed a flat circle. 2024. A tidal wave of allegations. The 2024 regular season was ushered in with controversy, as Shohei Ohtani's longtime interpreter Ippi Mizuhara was fired by the Dodgers organization amid allegations of illegal gambling. It's worth noting that Mizuhara was not accused of gambling on baseball, though he has agreed to plead guilty to other charges. He was sentenced to 57 months in prison after pleading guilty to 1 charge of bank fraud and 1 count of submitting a false tax return. MLB personnel are allowed to bet on non-diamond sports, in other words, not baseball or softball, provided, and this is the important part of the situation, sports gambling is legal in their jurisdiction. Gambling remains illegal in California, leading Mizuhara to place bets with Matthew Bowyer, an accused bookmaker at the center of a larger investigation. MLB also banned a number of players for gambling-related offenses. Among them, a lifetime suspension for San Diego Padres infielder Tucupita Marcano, who gambled more than $150,000 on baseball games, even those that involved his own team at the time. Athletics reliever Michael Kelly and minor league players Jay Groom, Jose Rodriguez, and Andrew Saalfrank were suspended for a year. 2025. Ortiz, Clase indicted. That brings us to the present day, with Ortiz and Clase indicted for allegedly intentionally manipulating pitch results for payment. The Department of Justice alleges the duo agreed in advance with their co-conspirators to throw specific types of pitches and speeds of pitches, and that in some instances, the defendants received bribes and kickback payments in exchange for rigging pitches. Unlike with 2024's round of suspensions, this represents the first time in some while that MLB players are being alleged to have manipulated in-game results for improper monetary gain. The two have bigger problems than whatever punishment Manfred eventually hands down, though it seems fair to assume neither will pitch again in MLB. At minimum, it's clear that professional baseball's attitude toward gambling has changed a lot as sports betting has become legal across the country. Any kind of association with a casino used to be enough to get a beloved retired player placed on the ineligible list. Now, the league itself is partnered with the gambling industry. Indeed, Commissioner Rob Manfred named MGM Resorts the first official gaming partner of Major League Baseball back in 2018. And in March 2023, MLB touted a multi-year agreement with FanDuel that made it a co-exclusive official sports betting partner of MLB. Whether that's for the better or the worse is to be determined over the long haul. If nothing else, it ensures that professional baseball and gambling will remain more than mere acquaintances.